Looks like it is 2 p.m. on the dot, so we'll get started. Good afternoon and welcome to today's LexisNexis Firm Manager webinar, Better Practice Management in 2 Minutes. My name is Kelly Barker and I'll be the moderator for today's session. We do have a special presentation crafted just for you today. Our animated Senior Product Manager, Christopher Anderson, will be sharing 10 different ways to get started with LexisNexis Firm Manager in just 2 minutes for the first portion of the webinar. And then as a bonus, Senior Marketing Director Loretta Ruppert will close with some best practices of trust accounting and billing. And lastly, just so we are all on the same page, this is a 60-minute webinar and any questions will be answered at the very end of the webinar. And all attendees are in listen-only mode. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce our speakers, Christopher Anderson and Loretta Ruppert. Christopher Anderson is the Senior Product Manager for LexisNexis Firm Manager. Mr. Anderson has authored several articles and has presented at many national shows on various topics including law firm management, the ethics of cloud computing, and the evolution of technology. Take my word for it, if you haven't seen him speak in person, you're missing out. Prior to working with LexisNexis, he was the managing partner of a full-service law firm in Georgia and served as an assistant district attorney in New York City. He is a graduate of Cornell University and received his Juris Doctorate from the University of Georgia School of Law in 1994. Christopher Anderson is admitted to practice in the federal and state courts of New York and Georgia. And now for Loretta Ruppert. Loretta is the Senior Director with LexisNexis Law Firm Practice Management. Loretta brings experience as a previous business owner and legal technology consultant, manager of professional services for a CPA firm, subject matter expert for developing back office software, an accountant, and probably most relevant as a former law firm employee and user of law firm practice management and financial systems. Loretta has been with LexisNexis for 10 years in various positions from product development, solution line management, and community management. Loretta earned a Bachelor of Science degree in accounting. So with that, Christopher, are you ready to kick off the webinar?
Hello, Chris. We're not hearing you.
There we go. Let's try that again. Hi and greetings, everybody. The marvels of modern technology. Thank you so much for joining. As Kelly mentioned, the topic of today's presentation is Better Practice Management in 2 minutes. So I'm going to spend 2 minutes each on a variety of topics, 10 topics I think is what was advertised, that are things that you can do in 2 minutes to improve your practice. Now, of course, these things will require follow-up. But to get started on each one, you can do in 2 minutes or less. So we'll get started on that. And to Kelly's point, I am fairly animated. Some might liken me to a cartoon character. But we'll get started with this. And if there are any questions, as Kelly said, please do go ahead and use the question pane in your GoToMeeting, and we'll get them answered just as fast as we can. All right, so first of all, what are we talking about? LexisNexis Firm Manager is a web-based application that in its entirety is meant to help and designed by lawyers, for lawyers, to help you stay on top of your practice and better serve your customers. Firm Manager, LexisNexis Firm Manager as it exists today is purpose designed for solos and really small law firms, and so it's built with you in mind. So now let's get started on 10 topics in 2 minutes. So the first one I'd like to talk about is learning more about LexisNexis Firm Manager. And as funny as that might sound and self-serving as it might sound, I'm actually serious about this because using a tool like LexisNexis Firm Manager, I tend to liken when I speak to people, is like getting a gym membership. It's a really good idea if getting fit is what you have in mind. I mean, it's a great first step is getting that membership. But as I can personally attest, getting a gym membership and year after year does absolutely nothing to get you fitter unless you, A, go to the gym. That's important, but B, get some training on how to use it. Because the other thing I could attest is if you just do A, sooner or later you'll get yourself hurt and not go back to the gym. So with Firm Manager, it's the same thing. Firm Manager is a tool to help you manage your practice more like a business. But in understanding how to use that tool in its various and multiple different ways to help you do that is really essential to getting the best value out of it. And luckily, LexisNexis University offers free training for that purpose. So as you can see here, I've just showed like the two ones that are coming up. I think they're both tomorrow. There's just a getting started. So if you're a new user of Firm Manager, this helps you to understand some of the things you can do right away. And then tips and tricks maybe for the more advanced user. You could take these right one after the other, but these are offered every couple of weeks or every week so that you can do one week, one the next week, and really learn how to apply Firm Manager to your practice and to get the things that are most valuable out of it for you. The next thing that you can do, so in under 2 minutes, you can sign up for one of those classes, right? And then, of course, please do go, but that takes an hour. The second thing is to upload your documents. So if you're already using Firm Manager, what a wonderful thing to be able to do, to be able to keep your documents in your matters. Why is this so powerful? It's powerful because in keeping your documents in your matters, they are accessible to you anywhere you are, anytime you want them on any device. Now, we have this promise from other products like Dropbox or Google Drive, and those all do work as well. But this keeps things organized in your matter on a secure server built for lawyers with the ethical requirements of lawyers baked into how we do business with you and for you. And so that's really important. And the ability to get these on any device is also really powerful. All you need is your Firm Manager login, and you've got your documents. And how can you do this in under 2 minutes? Well, pick a matter. Any matter. Let's say, I usually try to say, let's pick one of your most recent matters. And you can drag and drop one or all of the documents from that matter into Firm Manager just by going to your Finder, or if you're on Windows, going to Windows Explorer, and literally selecting those documents and dropping them onto the matter in the attached records area. So you go to attached records, which you can see behind here, click Open Documents, and drag and drop them right onto there. This will then allow you to categorize the documents if you choose to, and to add metadata to the documents, meaning you can tag them with descriptions if you choose to. But 1 or 1,000 documents can upload all at once, and therefore in under 2 minutes you can get an entire matter's worth of documents started and get up and running with Firm Manager and have that entire matter with you without carrying a briefcase home, without carrying a briefcase to court, on your iPad, on your iPhone, on your laptop, whatever device you may happen to use at that location. Number 3. Start entering tasks. This is huge. I mean, nothing could be more daunting, or it keeps people from really getting value out of Firm Manager as much as tasks, and nothing can be as powerful as using tasks. Why is it daunting? Well, if you don't have any in there, where do you start? What tasks do you enter? You can't enter everything and think of every task that you've got from now until infinity and get it all in there right away. But in 2 minutes or less, you can certainly think of what are the next things to do in one or several matters that you're currently working on. By just limiting it to the current or most recent matters and then building it out from there, you can over time get all of your tasks in. In fact, you can do that by doing a swap out, but that takes more than 2 minutes. It's a 15-minute tip that's coming up. But in 2 minutes, you can certainly get the tasks in for one matter and get started. And that's the most important thing, again, is to get started getting more value out of Firm Manager. And if you know 1 or 2 or 3 matters have all the tasks in Firm Manager, that will get you going back and looking there to see, what do I still need to do in this case? What's the next thing to do? And what can I delegate to other people to do in this case? And then you, by building that habit of looking there for that case, you can then slowly over time add all your other cases. Using the task list also gives you great forward visibility into time crunches once you get all your cases in, so that you'll know when you have too much work coming up on a day, you can either reorganize or reschedule that work well ahead of time. This serves your clients better because you can instantly be able to, by looking at a matter, tell them what tasks are done and what tasks are coming up and who's doing them and who has done them. It also helps you to keep track of your time, because every task can be billed to time in Firm Manager. It also helps you to keep track of your deadlines that you need for the judges or opposing counsel, and again, like I said, any time crunches. So a really great thing you can do in less than 2 minutes is start entering tasks for at least one matter in Time Matters. Number 4. Oh, no, 3+. There's a bonus. But I mentioned it. I kind of buried the lead. But delegate those tasks. So in those same under 2 minutes, not only can you enter tasks for yourself, but you can delegate them out to others. And that's one of the really powerful things of Firm Manager, because if you delegate but you can't verify, you can't track, delegation can be really scary. But using the tasks in Firm Manager, you can delegate and keep track, if you see the ones in red on this screen, of what tasks are overdue that you've delegated to someone else so you can follow up with them and see how they're doing. You can also identify time crunches for your associates, for your paralegals, for your colleagues in your firm that they might not identify, and really help everybody stay on top of the cases and better serve your clients. Now for number 4, set up a weekly calendar. This cannot be overstated. So what I have here, what I'm showing you, is a sample weekly calendar. And this is something you can do in 2 minutes or less, because we'll share with you a template to do it. All this is a spreadsheet with blocks on it. And you can create blocks of time, and I would say should create blocks of time when you do certain things. You can have a team meeting at the same time every day, uninterruptible production time when you are going to do heads down work. And if anybody knows the Pomodoro method, but that's where you have a little desk timer where you assign yourself 20 minutes per task and then take a little break between them. But everybody knows that this time is uninterruptible. You're not to be interrupted while getting important, high thought thinkings done. Now, I do this in the morning on my calendar that I'm sharing here, because that's when I'm at my best. In the afternoons, I'm sort of brain dead, and it's better to do things that are more interruptible, where I don't need or want that lengthy concentration time. Set times to return calls and emails. Can't overstate the importance of having that for your clients, for your staff, and for you, because having that set time to return calls and emails, A, gives the clients an expectation, B, gives your staff something to say, like Mr. Anderson returns calls from 1:30 to 2 or from 5 to 6. What time and what day would be best for you, thereby also eliminating or at least greatly reducing the the return call that gets to a voicemail that is a complete waste of your time. Other time for open meetings, I had administrative time, and then swamp out. And this is sort of the other bonus, the 15-minute thing. Once a week, getting all of your active cases together and deciding and making sure you know what the next step or steps are in that case, who's responsible for it, how long it's going to take, and getting that entered on your task list, and then putting those files back in the drawer, so that at the end of the swamp out, which should take between 15 and 30 minutes, except for the first time, which will take 2 hours, you end up with a clean desk and a good, complete set of tasks and a good idea if you've got any time crunches coming up. So there's the bonus 15-minute thing that you can do. But back to 2 minutes, number 5. Start keeping case dates in the calendar of Firm Manager. Again, this is you can start this in less than 2 minutes. And by just choosing a case or a couple of cases where you're going to enter the upcoming dates, whether they're court dates, client meetings, depositions, whatever they are, because the Firm Manager calendar is you just double click to enter a time on a date, and that calendar entry is done. So you can double click on the calendar at a given date and time and enter an event, or you can do this in the matter, again in the attached record section, by creating a new event there. And this way, not only you, but everybody in your firm can see what's going on in the cases that you're working on and other people are working on, and where you need to be and when you need to be there, so that it's clear, and you can, again, see this on all your devices, wherever you are. And coming soon, by the middle of March, it'll also be synchronized with Google Calendar. So you can also see this on your native apps, whether you're on Android or iOS devices. But this calendar just can keep you on top of where you're supposed to be and when you're supposed to be there. And that in combination with the tasks really keeps you on top of your game. Now, again, a really daunting thing to try to get all your cases entered, to get all your calendar items in all at once. But in 2 minutes or less, you can certainly get the calendar items for one matter into Firm Manager and start to build that habit of tracking your stuff in Firm Manager. So that's number 5, another great thing that you can do in Firm Manager to keep your case dates in the calendar. Number 6. Number 6. Don't want to look forward. Number 6. Start a new habit. Record your time. We did a study, and Loretta may talk to you a little bit more about this in her piece, but we did a study that determined that small law firms are leaving upwards of 40% of their time unbilled. And by that I don't mean firms, I mean the lawyers in the firms are working, are at the office, but only billing and getting even invoices out the door for 60% or less of their time, leaving 40% on the table. This 40% is time you could devote to rainmaking, to client development and maintaining your clients, to strategic planning of your firm or of your cases, or quite honestly to your family or to your hobbies. You can add value to your firm, add value to your life, or both with this time, or bill it, but one of these things can happen. And by losing that time, it's just going out the window. So building a habit, recording your time, is clicking on this wonderful red dot. This red dot is the record button in Firm Manager. And when you click it, the clock starts. And when you stop it, Firm Manager prompts you to enter a time slip. Now, you don't have to build this time slip. You can just use it as keeping track of your time in your cases, because some people bill flat fee or project-based or value-based billing, which I strongly support. But I also support, even for those folks, tracking your time, because until you know how much work, how much time the major asset of your firm is going into those cases, you still don't know if they're profitable. Making time capture is a habit that can help, and starting it is less than 2 minutes. It's just simply clicking that red button. Number 7, entering time and expense. Now, this is, you might say, this is the same as starting a habit of clicking the red button, but it isn't. It's different. What I'm talking about here is making a habit of tracking your time and costs in a matter in a way that will help you get paid. So again, it's particularly if you bill by the hour, but also if you flat fee bill. When you track the time, entering the description of the time or the expense and why it was valuable to the client is a huge step towards getting those bills paid. Now, that 40% left on the table did not include the drastic amount of time, particularly in small law firms, that we write down or write off time and costs because we don't either believe, we write them down even before the bill goes out because we don't believe that the client will pay it, or then the client complains and we write it down after the bill's gone out and we get that phone call. And by making it clear in the billing what the value delivered was is another great habit that you can start in your next time slip in under 2 minutes by keeping your time and expense in Firm Manager as it happens and as you remember what exactly it is you did, so you can describe why you did it. Now, hopefully, you're not doing many things in your client's cases that are of no value to them, but letter to opposing counsel doesn't tell them anything why they should pay $50, $150 for that. But letter to opposing counsel to move forward the settlement discussion and hopefully bring this case to an early close does, right? And so that communicates the value that you really were trying to communicate to deliver value in that case, and entering the time like that is something that you can, again, do in less than 2 minutes and add real value to your practice. Number 8, link them up. I often say when people talk to me about using that they've used case management before, or that they have their data in spreadsheets or in Outlook or in various bits and pieces of places where information can be kept. So they have their billing in one program, their documents in Microsoft Word, their calendar in Outlook. And that's all well and good, and you can certainly run that way. But the real value of case management software, matter management software, and the real way that it can bring value to your firm is in the connections. It's in the fact that in this particular matter, I've got this particular witness, this particular expert, and this particular judge. But this particular expert has served or served for me or against me in 18 other matters. Having the ability to simply click in this related records area on the name of an expert, this Brandon Heath, let's say, and see all the information from all the other cases he's been involved in, or click on a judge's name and learn what dates he hates or she hates to have hearings and what dates he or she loves to play golf, really can help. Or your client that's serving across many matters, their pertinent information about their wife, their kids, what kind of presents they like for Christmas, etc., really can help by building those connections, having the documents connected to one or more matters, having those calendar items connected to a matter so you can in one fell swoop look at all the things that you've done, all the appointments you've gone to in a matter, or all the tasks that you've completed in a matter. That is the power of case and matter management, is giving you that view of everything through different prisms. Okay, now I want to see everything that this client's done, or every matter this client's had, or I want to see how many matters this appointment served. Whatever it is, you can look through various prisms and see all the information in a variety of different ways and really get a better and deeper understanding of what's going on in your practice. Linking them up, making sure that your contacts are linked to your matters, and your matters are linked to your contacts, and your calendar items are linked to your matters, et cetera, is another thing that you can start in just under 2 minutes, but it's a really great habit and helps to build the knowledge that is the value of your firm. Number 9, seek and ye shall find. Beginning users of Firm Manager tend to use the tabs to find stuff. When I want to work in a matter, I click on the Matter tab. When I want to see something about a contact, I click on the Contact tab. When I want to enter some tasks or look up a task, I should say, I look on the Task tab. When I want to look up a time slip, I click on the Billing tab. But as you become more advanced user of Firm Manager, you learn to use the search button, which makes all those tabs obsolete because you can find everything and anything in Firm Manager by typing in just a few characters in the search bar. Here I've typed in the word Buswinkle. And you can see in the search results, and I can choose whether I want just matters as results or just documents as results or everything. In this case, I chose everything. And it searches not only across all the information in Firm Manager, but also inside full text of every document in Firm Manager so that you can get a complete 360-degree view of this information anywhere and everywhere you've ever had it. And this gives you the ability to find it quickly, and as you can see, it's even context. It delivers it with context, so you know whether or not to look at each one of these items based on the context that that word is in that record. Really powerful way to get around Firm Manager. In a minimum of clicks, you can get to a document, to a matter, to a time slip really quickly just by entering it in the global search tool. Really powerful tool, really useful in Firm Manager. The search also has another capability, and this is tip number 10. A conflict of interest search. For solo and small firms, conflict of interest searches have often been done in, let's just say, not entirely adequate methods. The Firm Manager conflict of interest search gives you the capability of doing a full-on, no-fooling conflict of interest search, again, across not only all the information you put in Firm Manager, but every document you've stored in Firm Manager so that you get a great view of what conflicts might arise in those areas. And here I've typed in the word ANDER. I've just typed in ANDER and searched, and I've gotten these results and several more. I can then decide whether or not there is in fact a conflict. I can assign it to someone else as a task to decide whether or not there's a conflict. And once I've made the decision, that decision, time and date stamped, is preserved with the results as they appeared at the moment I did the search. So that a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, if you're challenged on whether or not a good conflict of interest search was done in a case, you can defend it based on what you knew then, not what you know now. A really powerful tool, previously only available to larger law firms with large and expensive database programs, now in the hands of solo and small firms through LexisNexis Firm Manager, and something you can start doing right away and do your first conflict of interest search again in less than 2 minutes. That's the 10 that we promised, but I always like to give a little bit more. Number 11, who's counting? Open a Matter Trust account. This is a new feature released in Firm Manager in December. We're in our ongoing effort to deliver a complete billing solution. We've got invoicing to you in October, trust accounting to you in December. We've got more bits and pieces coming out in January that deliver a great billing experience both to you and to your clients. But opening up a trust account is something you can certainly do in less than 2 minutes, where you can add funds to a trust account and pay invoices from that trust account. But again, don't want to bury the lead. Loretta's going to be talking about trust accounts and why this is so valuable. But in less than 2 minutes, you can get started with your newest matter, getting a trust account open, and start using the trust accounting feature of Firm Manager to make reconciliation and the keeping of your trust accounts, meeting your obligations under the model rules of professional conduct, meeting your professional obligations to your client, and using Firm Manager to do it, and thereby improving your firm. So that is the 10 plus 1 and a bonus before that, things that you can do in 2 minutes or less to improve your practice under LexisNexis Firm Manager. As Kelly said, we're actually going to take questions at the end. So I'm going to hold off. I have the question and answer slide here, but we're going to take the questions at the end, and I'm going to pass for now, the presentation over to Loretta Ruppert, and her presentation is Billing and Trust Accounting Best Practices. Loretta, as Kelly mentioned, is a Senior Director over here at LexisNexis Firm Manager, and is an accountant by trade. And I'll just hand the presentation over to her at this time, and we'll take your questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Okay, Chris, are you actually driving it, and then I'll just speak to it? I'm sorry, that's what I thought. I apologize. Great. Thank you so much, Chris. So for many of us, we have a love-hate relationship with billing. We love to get paid, but in order to get paid, and to that point, we must have to first track and bill for our time and our services. And that mundane process of recording billable time and then processing bills can take a lot of time, and that's not what attorneys want to do or should be spending their time on. And if you bill for services at a flat rate, it doesn't preclude you from the need to track time. On the contrary, for flat fees, you need to know if you're actually what you're charging is profitable. So as you can see on the top of this slide, it says until we manage our time, until we manage our time, we manage nothing else. And that's by Peter Drucker, this really, great business author out there. He was the author of something called The Effective Executive. And I've referenced 5 principles for being an effective leader, that's just back towards the end there as a little bonus for you. As we move forward. So Chris, if you can move to the next slide. Great, thank you. LexisNexis conducted a survey in the middle of 2012. We've actually just recently conducted one also on Cloud Survey, which is pretty interesting, and we'll release that out to our users as well so that you can see how others have actually, how other peers of yours actually have answered this. What was interesting about this particular survey we did in the middle of 2012 is we had almost 500 attorneys respond to the first survey, and we had over 1,000 respond to the second one. The first survey went out asking, it was called the Billable Hour Survey, asking how long did they actually work throughout the day, and then how much of that time did they actually bill. And then we had that segmented not only by size of firm, but also then by area of practice, by state, etc. And the second part of the survey was based on the one where 1,100 people responded, was really focused on where are they spending their non-billable time. If you are not billing your time, what are you spending it on, basically? So as you'll see here on this particular slide, on average, attorneys billed 69% of their time that they worked. And then for every hour worked, that means 20 minutes of it was lost. 20 minutes of the time was not being billed. And then, of course, as Chris had alluded earlier, that in the solo and small law segment, the 1 to 2 attorney space, that was the space that really got hit hard, where only 60% of the time was being billed. And granted that as a solo and small law firm, you typically are wearing multiple hats. So Chris, if you don't mind going to the next slide, I'll kind of go over those highlighted areas. So the biggest culprit that we found in this was that practice management and administrative tasks. It might come as no surprise that 50% of the respondents ranked administrative or practice management tasks, document management, filing, docketing, billing, accounting, as the number 1 or 2 activities that was eating up the majority of the non-billable work hours. This finding was remarkably consistent across the firms of all sizes and geographies. But one thing that you'll notice that's not implicated here is networking, client development, client relationship development, etc. Nearly 70% of the survey participants reported that the client development activities had relatively little impact on their ability to focus on billable client work. Most of that was done, I believe, after hours. And then other findings that were pretty interesting is that 10% of the survey respondents claimed that they couldn't actually account for their time due to a lack of chaotic schedules. And I can imagine, I've actually been in many law firms where it seems like the distractions really get the best of you. You get a phone call, you're in the middle of work, someone opens the door and says, hey, so-and-so just stopped by to get something done. Can you, meet with them real quick? All those little distractions really make a really big difference. So kind of going back to what Chris was talking about on actually scheduling your time in a way in which you'd like to work, and then training your staff and other workers around that really makes you more productive. We also segmented by the size of firm, and interestingly enough, law firms between 11 and 20 attorneys, which is on the larger side, took the icing on the cake. They billed almost 90% of every hour that they worked, and most of that was due to I think at that level they likely have more staff, or they've been trained in that way to only work on that, and they have enough staff to be able to handle some of the administrative stuff. So moving to the next slide. So this leads us up to the part where if you look at the top 25% of the firms who responded, 56% of them were actually small law firms, as saying that they were actually the most efficient. So out of the 500 firms that responded, almost the top 25% of them, more than half of them were small law firms. And so it's not necessarily size that actually made the difference. So what were they doing right? So if you go to the next slide, basically, up to this point, we focused on why you should spend more time on, on some of these higher value, like being able to focus on being able to delegate where you can. So you want to focus on that high value work. Outsource when you can, because we know that solo small law firms, you don't necessarily know when it is, when's the right time to actually hire a staff versus when do you outsource, and then what's your return on that. That makes a big difference, because for every money, every dollar that you spend out the door is a dollar that's not in your pocket. We understand that. But there is actually a tipping point there and a way to be able to calculate that. You want to use tools that make it easy to track time, automate processes, consolidate information for better time management. A good friend of ours who's on our advisory board, Ann Gwynn, she wrote a book on managing, a law firm, a small law firm, and she had quoted this and got this from some study that an average attorney spends 108. Not an average. I'm not sure it was an average, but there are some attorneys who spend 180 hours a year trying to look for a document or documents at any point in time. So one day maybe it's 10 minutes, the next day maybe half an hour. You're just constantly shuffling. So being able to have a centralized location to put these is really great. So the 3 tips that I thought I'd give on the billing efficiency tips were, one is you need to track all time, billable and non-billable. And this is something that we actually have up here on the walls of LexisNexis, and on many of the walls we have these walls that you can write on that are kind of like the eraser boards. But basically you cannot manage what you don't measure. That's one of the most important things. That how are you going to understand whether or not you're spending your time more efficiently, or your staff by that matter? You want to make sure that you understand your staff and what they're doing, because it could be that there are staff that think that they're both doing the same thing, or that there's a better way to do things if you start looking to see where they're spending their time. Plan your non-billable time and stick to it. This kind of goes back to that template that Chris had shown you, where you stack, you purposefully track time for administrative, you track time for when you're going to do real legal work, when you're going to return phone calls, when you're going to focus on that. It's really a hard change to make sometimes, but once you make that change, you'll actually find that you're being more productive. And then don't undervalue your work. So the biggest cause of this is, just think about it. When you value your work, the best way to understand this is to track your billable time, and then not only billable time, but how much you're actually receiving back. And then that leads us into our next slide on don't undervalue your work. So many times when I've done this particular presentation about efficient billing and trust accounting best practices in front of actual lawyers in a room, I'll ask these questions individually. I didn't get these times up that way. I just stuck them all up at once for you. But one is, what percentage of your time actually gets billed? Do you know this? If you don't, this is something you should get really familiar with. It will help you understand more about your business, and then you want to just start trying to track that to get that better. Of the time that actually gets billed, what percentage actually comes back into the law firm as revenue? So, I could bill $1,000, but then if my client pays me $800 and I write off $200, I'm not at 100% realization. I'm at 80% realization. So it's really important to make sure that you're looking to see if how you actually, are you undervaluing what you're actually worth, and making sure that you're tracking that information and knowing what those numbers are. And then the last one is actually something that's really important, and it's, what is the cost to service a client? What is your cost? You have staff, you might be outsourcing, you have this, so leverage and margin, and I'll go over what these production and utilization, realization, and leverage and margin means. They're basically is a way to kind of simplify. The production is basically the number of hours you have the ability to work multiplied by your average billing rate. The utilization is actually what you billed, how many hours you've actually worked and billed. And then your realization are those numbers that you've actually billed and what you've received against what you've received. When you say leverage, the cost of servicing a client, if you have something that you're doing that you can have a paralegal do who gets paid less than you and maybe gets billed less than you want to be able to leverage your staff. So it's really understanding how to leverage the staff that you have, or if you have a non-billable administrative help that can actually go in and help you do something that's not required for legal work, but maybe to help you do something that you're doing. That's why it's important to understand what you're actually spending your time doing. And then margin, of course, kind of has to do with managing the expense side of your business. It's really understanding what you're actually paying for, where your money is going, and that's usually where people have a better understanding when you're a small law firm. You understand where you're spending your money, but is it in the right buckets? So that's one thing to consider. So these are 3 areas there that I think are really important for you to take a good understanding of what you know about your law firm, and all of these will be coming out to you. The slides will be coming out to you in an email tomorrow. Next slide. So I wanted to move off that the last few slides were really kind of talking about billing best practices and those areas of how to really adjust for your time. It kind of goes back to what Chris was saying as well, is managing your time, but also making sure that you are billing it as you're doing it. So if you are a person who is, it's really getting in that habit of actually tracking your time. But along with that comes along some accounting best practices. And with accounting best practices, I always have to put this disclaimer here, and I apologize for that, but the disclaimer is that laws change frequently. There's always lots of things. Always make sure that you understand what your state's regulations are. I'm giving you this information based off of some online resources that I found, which mainly come from the ABA or from various different state bars, but they can change, and so always go up there to find out your latest, or talk to your practice management advisor also with your state bar. So I wanted to discuss the basics on this one page before I go into some tips. First of all, what is a trust account? And I think that there's some confusion sometimes among some folks, but trust accounts, they can be funds that you're holding on behalf of a client for a number of other things. It's not necessarily to pay you. It might be to disperse a settlement that you're holding. It might be to hold for future earned fees that you have or expenses, or sometimes they're earmarked very specifically to pay down costs. So for instance, if you're a personal injury attorney and you know that you're going to be doing a lot of out-of-pocket costs to some experts, even if you are on a contingency basis, you may say, look, I don't have this kind of money to spend out there, so I need a retainer, or I need money specifically in a trust fund to be able to pay my medical experts and to get all the copies of the medical records and to, et cetera. And that's really what that's for. And it has to be used very specifically for that. It cannot be commingled inside your own law firm. Also, your fee agreement with the client can define when and how you use them. So always put this in writing. There should be no misunderstandings. That's also a common error that sometimes lawyers will do, is that they have a trust fund, but it's not real explicit inside the actual fee agreement how you're going to use it and when you can use it. Make sure that that's really clear. And then there are interest-bearing and non-interest-bearing accounts, and I'll go over this real quickly. So, up until the IOLTA account was established back in like 1989 or something like that, basically you had to set up non-interest-bearing accounts for all of your clients. And you could set up interest-bearing accounts too, and then the 1099 would actually go to your client, but it was an accounting nightmare for attorneys and for law firms. It was just a mess. So when the IOLTA fund came out, that's really a trust fund that was set up specifically that goes, any interest that comes out of the trust funds for your clients goes into the state's foundation, bar foundation, which is usually held to support representing the indigent. So a lot of times it might go to your law school's legal clinics where they're helping people for free, legal counsel, or it might be going to some other kind of legal entity out there, legal aid, that's a nonprofit to help people who cannot represent, who don't have enough money to have representation. So next slide. So when I start talking about the trust accounts, there's 4 Ps for trust accounting. That's funny because I use the 4 Ps for just about everything. So for those of you who've ever seen something here, I can give you 4 Ps for just about everything. But the one sure thing that you have to understand is I always put people first. That's because people are the weakest link. They're the place where if there's going to be a failure, that's where it's going to be failed at. And it's sometimes on purpose and sometimes, it's by accident. But that's why it's important to have those other 3 Ps in place. You have to have the policies really clear. You have to process. You have to understand what the process is. And then you have to have written procedures so that it's really clear for whoever is doing this in your firm that they understand what it is. Now, as a stakeholder of your law firm, you need to make sure that you're doing background checks on your employees, whether they're contract bookkeepers or even external accountants. Even an accountant, you should do a background check on. So, I've been to too many places where there's been embezzlement that's happened, and it's not always on that general fund, it's on trust funds, because that's the easy place to target. So develop some internal controls to make sure that there's a second set of eyes reviewing the reconciliation and reports. And I have a different tip for you on the next slide on that one to get a little bit more detail on that. And then you'll notice that the next 3 training is there. It is so important that not only is it that you're providing the training on internal policies to make sure that your employees sign off on them. Now, signing off on them, make sure that they know that it almost takes it to the point where they feel like they're accountable now because you're making them sign off on a document saying that they've read it and they understand it. And, as simple as that might sound, sometimes they'll pay a little bit more attention to what it is that you're trying to provide them and to protect yourself and to protect your firm and to protect their job. So that's why you're doing it. And there should be no apologies for that. The other thing is, do I have that down twice? I'm so sorry. I have to provide internal policies twice.
It's just that important.
Yeah, that's that important. Right. There's actually a third one that was in there, but provide training on, I said provide training. Many bar associations offer on-demand or live training classes that provide a step-by-step of what needs to be done properly to manage your trust account. I highly recommend that if you have staff that's coming on board with you, or even if they've been on board with you for a while, it doesn't hurt to go and sign up for that training. It's typically offered for free. And it's something that would really kind of help also make sure that they're up to speed on the most recent guidelines. The one that says it's duplicate, that was supposed to be provide training on the processes. And the processes, which are different than internal policies, which is who owns what, who, whose throat to choke type of a thing. The processes really focuses on who gets what. I mean, who is going to do the reconciliation? Who has the authorization to write the checks? Whose responsibility? Part of that process and the procedures are also to say, before you write a check and disperse anything, you must always check to make sure that there's enough money in the account. I know that sounds funny, but if it's not written down, are they going to skip that one time when they're in a rush? They might. So if you go to the next slide there, the 5 tips that I'm going to leave you for trust accounting is that when you have a trust account, you want to make sure that you, or whoever it is that you designate in your office, but it shouldn't be the same person who is reconciling the account, receives the bank statement, goes to their attention, and it is sealed. And I'll tell you a story because I actually remember I was a law firm consultant for many years in addition to being a CFO. And I actually had someone embezzle one of the accounts that I went to, and it was because they got the bank statements, they pulled out the checks that they had written and forged, right, and out of the bank reconciliation, and did the reconciliation. And the way that they were able to get away with this was because the attorney's getting ready to go out of town or going to court. They get in a hurry and they say, hey, I've got to disperse all those funds today in order for us to get money to get paid because I'm doing bills. Can I have you sign these checks? And they'd sign blank checks. And so that's the number one. You don't want to do blank checks. But if you're getting a sealed bank statement and you're getting those, you have the checks. And many times the bank statements today, instead of they'll have the checks, but a lot of times they also have the images of the checks, which is great. Because then you don't need to worry about necessarily having something forged, having a check actually taken out. But if you receive that sealed bank statement, that's going to be pretty important. Also, only lawyers should sign those checks. You designate who that lawyer is and make sure that they have a really clear understanding of what it is that they're signing and why. And then also you want to make sure that you segregate those duties of those people who write the checks. It might be a bookkeeper who writes the checks, but they should not also be doing the reconciliation. You want to assign maybe your office manager or maybe someone else within your firm, or have the office manager. You just want to make sure that you have 2 different people doing that. And then you, as the owner, you should sign off on that bank statement. So after that bank statement's been reconciled, you look at it, you make sure that you feel comfortable that everything's been accounted for, and then you sign off on it. And then you use legal-specific software that that's going to help you understand what the trust account is, because when you use software such as, and I'm not going to say that these are not bad products, it's just that there's a lot more hoops you have to jump through because it wasn't meant to handle these type of accounts. But say, for instance, like QuickBooks or There's Xero, FreshBooks, that just weren't meant to handle trust accounts in that same way by a client matter, being able to transfer funds or pay against a bill. It's not something that they were meant to do, and therefore, I fear that there's the more steps that you put in there that someone has to follow, the more room there is for mistakes. That's all there is to it. And when you get a legal-specific software, that's built in line for what the attorney's professional responsibility is, and I think that's important. One last thing that I put on here is when I said that you have a pair of eyes that basically is signing off on the bank statement. For anyone else, it's to hold that person accountable, and they know that it's going to be checked off by somebody else, and it could actually help deter any kind of embezzlement at all. And then the last thing is that you want to take a look at anything that, as you see those bank reconciliations, if you see that there are some trust checks that you've dispersed, and they're like over 120 days old, you want to take a look at those and find out why they're not being cashed. You shouldn't be letting your checks get that old. You need to make sure that you're on top of those and either cancel them, reissue them, try and get contact with them to make sure that those aren't stale dated checks sitting out there for too long. And then the next slide, Chris. So this next slide is actually where I was going to have Chris just quickly show you in the product how quickly it is when you're doing all this, kind of pulling together your bill, checking your matter balance to show your funds, pay an invoice from trust, and then you check the matter balance, you can see where it's at again. So would love for you to see this. We don't hear you, Chris. Chris?
I've really got to learn about that mute button. All right, so thank you, Loretta. This demo is just going to cover those topics, and it won't take very long because, as you'll see, in Firm Manager, it is easy to accomplish this. So I'm going to go into a matter, the Boswinkle Aviation acquisition matter, and we'll just go ahead and enter some time. What I'll do here also while I'm talking, we'll start that little red button that I talked about earlier. But meanwhile, while that's counting down, we'll go ahead and add a cost that we incurred in this case. So we had some photocopies that we had to do of the aircraft records in Wichita. So we had 1,000 copies of registration and FAA records. And the copies were, let's see, about 10 cents each. We had to do 1,000 of them. And so they were $100. We are going to charge those. And this is a note for myself. This is not going to go to the client. I just remind myself of why I did it. Now I can do save and new so that I can quickly add new records as well. So that one's been added. And now I'm also going to just add some time. So some analysis of FAA records. So while I was copying them, I also looked at them for a bit, for about an hour and a half. And then we'll save and close that one. So we better, forgot to add that matter back in. So while I was doing that, so now I'll save and close so that I've entered some time and expense. You can see there's some others already entered here. I'll go to my billing, and it's time to invoice. Oh, and by the way, I should have pointed out, if you notice, while I'm working on this client, at all times I see that I've got $2,875 sitting in trust, but I've also got $2,140 of uninvoiced time now. So my WIP is starting to approach my trust balance, something I should probably be concerned about. I can jump right away to see the trust account, but we won't do that quite yet because next on, we just did check the matter balance. So now we're going to go ahead and enter an invoice. We'll go to the invoicing section here and create an invoice. And again, we were working in that acquisition matter. And we can either time box it, so I can say I want to invoice for only things last month, or I can do all uninvoiced time, which is what I'm going to select right now. And what it's going to do is gather up any time that hasn't already been put on an invoice for this matter and put it on an invoice. I can remove something from this, so I can say that I don't want this to go on the bill yet, but maybe in the future. I can remove the photocopies if I want to. And so only the things that I want to be on this particular invoice are on there. I can send a comment to the client, and then whenever it's ready, I can also specify a due date. If I wanted to, I could have had that it was a net 7, and it'll calculate that for me, which I'll do right there. And then I'll save it as an invoice. Once I save it as an invoice, nobody can edit these time slips that are on the invoice anymore. And then you'll see that the invoice has been saved, and in fact, we have this invoice 1010 here that is unpaid. So now I can go, if we go back to my matter, the 4073 matter, we'll see that the uninvoiced time has now gone down because I just invoiced for a bunch of it. Let's view the trust account. The trust account for this case is $2,875, and I can go ahead and apply some of that to an invoice. Now, I can apply that to any invoice I want, or multiple invoices. So we have the one that 1010 that we just did, so I'll apply it to that one. I've got $2,875, a $1,630 invoiced. I am going to apply it to pay the full amount, and I can make some notes here if I wanted to. Save and close. And now you'll see that the payment's been applied to the invoice. The trust account balance has been reduced appropriately. And if I go back to my invoices, you'll see that I'll click on Show Paid here, that 1010 has now been marked paid. And if I go and look at that invoice, and it brings it back up, you'll see that that invoice itself has in fact been marked paid. So that is how the trust accounting and the invoice payment system works. You see it's marked paid up here in the corner, and the balance due on that particular invoice is 0, and it shows a payment history so the client can see how in fact that was paid. You can also back all of this out in case you do make a mistake. And then of course if we go back to that matter one more time, we'll see that the balance now in that matter is $510 in uninvoiced time expense. The trust balance is $1,245. And just as a final demo, we've had that clock running all the time. If I stop the clock, I would now be able to bill for that 0.08 hours that I was talking. I won't do that, but would be able to do that. So that checks off all those things that Loretta wanted to show you in the demo, but basically also shows you how quickly and easily time can be entered, invoiced, trust account can be managed and paid, and now that trust account is already reconciled against the trust balance, all in just a few easy steps, all working within the matter within Firm Manager.
Thank you so much, Chris. Now, going back to the presentation, just 5 key takeaways, and then we've got a number of questions that have come in through the question and answer pane. So the 5 key takeaways basically is understand where your time is spent by all workers of the firm, billable and non-billable staff. Know the difference between work and results, right? Because you can work really hard but get nothing out of it, and that's kind of like working for your time and being able to make sure you're working on the higher value items. Build your strengths with the team, and then also concentrate on minor areas where performance makes a big impact. If tracking your time is one of those areas where you think you can make a big impact, then make sure you focus on that. Or making sure that you have a staff member do something first with some document automation or something like that. And then know that making effective decisions, they don't happen by accident. It is a system, and it does take a little bit of time to, get your head wrapped around it. But once you do, then you'll actually be able to reap those benefits. So just moving on to that final slide there, Chris, for the question and answers, and I believe Kelly's going to read a few to you.
Yep. So now we'll open the webinar up for Q&A. So please enter any questions you have via the questions pane on your webinar control panel. All right, so the first question is, how about syncing with Gmail or Outlook Express? We need to do that with our contacts and calendars.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Just some broad thinking on syncing. I think I mentioned it in the early part of the webinar, but just to be clear, we're going to have the capability of syncing calendars in about 5 weeks. So about the middle of March, we're going to be able to sync calendars, so 5 or 6 weeks, with Google first, and then through Google to several other platforms. But so you'll be able to get your calendar synced across many different platforms. Following on that, we'll sync contacts and email. So those things will be coming out over the course of the next several months, but calendars first because that's the thing that our clients have wanted the most. So that is the plan with that. But we're going to be synchronizing with several things, as well as there's been a couple questions about accounting software. In the solo and small law space, over 50% of law firms that do use some sort of accounting software, more than 50%, use some version of QuickBooks. So our first accounting integration will be with QuickBooks, and that we should be expecting to come out in the next 2 to 3 months. But so we'll be integrating with them. We'll be looking at other accounting systems as well, but of course, just serving the one that serves the most people's needs right up front.
Great, thanks, Chris. The next question is, can we import from QuickBooks?
Okay, so that's sort of that's the same question in a different way, but yeah. So when we do the integrations with the accounting software, it'll be two-way. So everything will be imported from QuickBooks, and everything that you put in QuickBooks will come into Firm Manager. Everything in Firm Manager will go to QuickBooks. That is relevant, right? So not everything from Firm Manager to QuickBooks, but all the time and expense, the invoices, et cetera. And of course, you'll be able to control what parts of that go in and what parts don't. But so yes, the import from QuickBooks will be automated through the integration. That being said, you can import from QuickBooks today by doing an export from QuickBooks, and our team, our tech support team, will help you to import all your clients and matters from QuickBooks into Firm Manager today.
Next question is, can the laptop be removed from the office for use, and how does the staff use Firm Manager while I am gone?
All right, so the beauty of Firm Manager is you are not tied to your office, to your home, or to your beach. You can access Firm Manager wherever you want to, whenever you want to, as long as you get an internet connection. So, you know, Starbucks or Starbucks in Bangkok, Thailand, you can access Firm Manager, and your staff can access it too. Each member of your staff gets their own username and password so that they can securely log into Firm Manager. But so also, you know, if they depart your staff, you can deprive them of access if you need to. But so you do not need to be there. Everybody on your staff, everybody in your office can access Firm Manager on their own device while you take yours with you.
Great, thank you. The next question is, can an invoice be placed on your firm's letterhead?
Yeah, great question. So invoicing is, as I mentioned, I think earlier, invoicing was released in October, and right now there is one template for invoicing. Coming soon is going to be the ability to choose from among several templates and to include your own logo, your own firm's marketing information on the invoice. For right now, it just prints out in the form that we have. We've had some customers, because it does print down far enough on the page that you're able to put some of your firm's marketing information on the letterhead paper that you printed onto. But we're going to give you the native ability to print it with your letterhead, or your logo, I should say, included coming soon.
Great. Let's see here. Are any client portals planned?
So we not only are client portals planned, but with Firm Manager, even today, any subscriber to Firm Manager that wishes to can have a free license of Watchdocs, or license of Watchdocs at no charge. And Watchdocs is a software that allows you to share and track documents and other files with your clients or other third parties. So in other words, you can share stuff with them, but even after they download them, you can control what they can do with them. You can let them look at them but not print them, let them look at them but not forward them, let them print them but only with the watermark, however, and you can change your mind and even revoke access even after you've given it to them. And that's available, and they can share documents back with you, and that's through the Watchdocs portal that you get with a Firm Manager license. Coming later in the second quarter will be an integration where you'll actually be able to share documents directly from within Firm Manager. But right now, we do provide the portal as a separate but no charge feature of Firm Manager. And you know, that integration with Firm Manager will be continuing to get bigger and bigger as time goes on.
Great, thanks, Chris. That looks like That's all we have time for today, and that does conclude our webinar. So thank you, Christopher and Loretta, for your expert advice today, and to all of our attendees for taking time out of your busy day to join us. Please don't forget to complete our survey and keep a lookout for an email with a link to a recording of today's webinar. So that's all, and have a wonderful afternoon.